What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We are back for part 2 of the photographs Iceberg. Let's get started. All right, y'all, level 2, guys, and we're only getting more interesting as we get deeper into the iceberg. Let's get started. Our first photo is raising a flag over Reichstag. So raising a flag over Reichstag is an iconic World War II photograph taken during the Battle of Berlin on May 2nd, 1945. The photograph was reprinted in thousands of publications and came to be regarded around the world as one of the most significant and recognizable images of World War II. Owing to the secrecy of Soviet media, the identities of the men in the picture were often disputed, as was that of the photographer. Geni Kalde, it became a symbol of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany. The Battle of Berlin was the final major offensive of the European theater of World War II and was designated the Berlin Strategic Offensive Operation by the Soviet Union. Starting on April 16, 1945, the Red Army breached the German front as a result of the Vistula-Oder offensive and rapidly advanced westward through Germany as fast as 30 to 40 kilometers a day. The offensive culminated in the battle in Berlin, which lasted from late April 20, 1945 until May 2nd and was one of the bloodiest battles in history. Erected in 1894, the Reichstag building, the historic seat of the German National Legislature, was among the most recognizable buildings in Germany. Architecture considered magnificent for its time, the building contributed much to German history and was considered by the Red Army to be the symbol of their fascist enemy. To the Nazis, however, the Reichstag was a symbol of the weakness of democracy and representative government. It was severely damaged in the Reichstag fire of 1933, and by 1945 had been closed for 12 years, essentially the entirety of the Nazi reign. All subsequent meetings of the Reichstag legislature, which grew increasingly infrequent in the years following the fire as Nazi decision-making was centralized with Adolf Hitler, had been convened at the near Kroll Opera House instead. After fierce combat within its walls, the Soviets finally captured the Reichstag on May 2nd, 1945. Our next image is Marina Ginesta. Marina Ginesta Coloma was a French-born Spanish communist, a member of the United Socialist Youth, and an iconic figure of the Spanish Civil War. She became famous due to the photo taken by Juan Guzman on the rooftop of Hotel Coron, Plaza de Catalunya, Barcelona, during the July 1936 military uprising in Barcelona. It is one of the most iconic photographs of the Spanish Civil War. The most famous photograph was taken on July 21st, 1936. It shows the 17-year-old Ginesta wearing an army uniform and posing with a rifle on the top of their original Hotel Colón, Plaza de Catalunya. The picture was taken during the 1936 military uprising in Barcelona. The rifle that Marina is holding is an M1916 Spanish Mauser, manufactured at the Oviedo factory in Spain for the Spanish army. Because she was a reporter, it was the only time Ginesta had carried a gun. The picture was soon published in a socialist newspaper. The picture later exploded in popularity due to the representation of the Spanish Civil War and is now a universal image of anti-fascism and conflict. Marina stated about the picture, "It's a good photo. It reflects the feelings we had at the moment. Socialism had arrived and the hotel's guests had left. There was euphoria. We were tired in Columbus, we ate well, as if bourgeois life belonged to us and we would have changed category quickly." The picture was later used on the cover of the book Las Tres Rosas by Carlos Fonseca. The hotel was destroyed after the war and the site is now occupied by the Banco Español de Crédito building. Our next photo is called Boulevard du Temple. The Boulevard du Temple photograph of 1838 or possibly 1839 is one of the earliest daguerreotype plates produced by Louis Daguerre. Although the image seems to be of a deserted street, it is widely considered to be the first photograph to include an image of a human. The earliest known photograph, the hieroglyphic view from the Window of Le Gras, had been produced some 10 years earlier with a technique that recognized an exposure time of some 8 hours, which meant that only static objects could be recorded. However, by 1838, Daguerre had developed his own method whereby the exposure was reduced to only 4 to 5 minutes. The photograph was taken from a window in Daguerre's studio beside the Diorama de Louis Daguerre at Rue de Marais, behind the Place du Château d'Eau. This was at a time before the Place de la République had been built, and the location is where now Rue de Faubourg du Temple joins the Place de la République. The plate is about 13 by 16 centimeters or 5 by 6 inches for us Americans. The Boulevard du Temple would have been busy with people and horse traffic, but because an exposure time of 4 to 5 minutes would have been required, the only people recorded are two keeping still: a boot block and his customer at the corner of the street shown at lower left of the plate. That's really cool. We're actually learning about photo history. That's cool. It's really cool that you can learn about photo history through photos. That's very, very cool. Our next photo is of Mystic Mountain. So Mystic Mountain is a photograph and a term for a region in the Serena Nebula imaged by the Hubble Space Telescope. The view was captured by the then new Wide Field Camera 3, though the region was also viewed by the previous generation instrument. The new view celebrated the telescope's 20th anniversary of being in space in 2010. Mystic Mountain contains multiple Herbig-Haro objects where nascent stars are firing off jets of gas which interact with surrounding clouds of gas and dust. This region is about 7,500 light years or 2,300 parsecs away from Earth. The pillar measures around 3 light years in height or 190,000 astronomical units. The name was influenced by the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Really cool. So you can see there's probably some references of Cthulhu in there, maybe. With a universe so large, there really is there is a possibility that a monster like Cthulhu exists somewhere out there. Alright, so this next photo was actually mentioned in our earlier entry. This is called Views from the Window of Le Gras. Views from the Window of Le Gras is a heliographic image and the oldest surviving camera photograph. It was created by French inventor Nicéphore Niepce, don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, in Saint-Luc de Varon, France, and shows part of a building and surrounding countryside of his estate, Le Gras, as seen from a high window. Niepce captured the scene with a camera obscura projected onto a 16.2 centimeter by 20.2 centimeter or 6.4 inch by 8 inch pewter plate thinly coated with bitumen of Judea, a naturally occurring asphalt. The bitumen hardened and brightly lit areas, but in the dimly lit areas it remained soluble and could be washed away with a mixture of oil of lavender and white petroleum. A very long exposure in the camera was required. Sunlight strikes the building on opposite sides, suggesting an exposure that lasted about 8 hours, which has become the traditional estimate. A researcher who studied Niepce's notes and recreated his process found that the exposure must have continued for several days. Our next image is the UC Davis pepper spray incident. The UC Davis pepper spray incident occurred in November 18, 2011, during an Occupy movement demonstrations at the University of California, Davis. After asking protesters to leave several times, University police pepper sprayed a group of demonstrators as they were seated on a paved path in the campus quad. The video of UC Davis police officer Lieutenant John Pike pepper spraying demonstrators spread around the world as a viral video, and the photograph became an internet meme. Officer Alex Lee also pepper sprayed demonstrators at Pike's direction. John Pike was subsequently fired despite the recommendation that he face disciplinary action but be kept on the job. As of August 2014, Alex Lee was no longer listed as a state salaried employee database as working at UC Davis. In October 2013, the judge ruled that Pike should be paid $38,000 in workers' compensation benefits for the suffering he experienced after the incident. Apart from the workers' compensation award, he retained his retirement credits. The 36 student demonstrators, meanwhile, were collectively awarded $1 million by UC Davis in a settlement from a federal lawsuit, with each pepper spray student receiving $30,000 individually. After the incident, large protests against the use of pepper spray occurred on campus. UC Davis Chancellor Linda P.B. Katehi apologized to the students and saying that the police had acted against her orders for there to be no arrest and no use of force. A public debate about the militarization of police and the appropriate use of pepper spray on peaceful protesters took place in the meeting. with questions about the freedom of speech and the right to peacefully assemble guaranteed by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That's a crazy story for an image. I do remember seeing that image, but I didn't really know much about it. That's insane. I think at the end of the day, it's a win-win. You know, the cop got compensated for money that was owed for him for his distress, and each student looked like they got paid as well. So both parties were financially compensated. I would say that's a win-win, and it sparked a conversation, so also a plus. Moving on, our next image is Monolith, the Face of Half Dome. Monolith, the Face of Half Dome, Yosemite National Park, California's, is a black and white photograph taken by Ansel Adams in 1927 that depicts the western face of Half Dome in Yosemite, California. In the foreground of the photo, viewers are able to see the texture and detail of the rock as well as the background landscape of pine trees and the Tenaya Peak. Monolith was used by the Sierra Club as a visual aid for the environmental movement and was the first photograph Adams made that was based on feelings, a concept he would come to define as visualization and prompt him to create the zone system. This image stands as a testament to the intense relationship Adams had with the landscape of Yosemite, as his career largely marked by photographing the park. Monolith has also physically endured the test of time, as the original glass plate negative is still intact and printable. The photograph is part of the portfolio Parmelian Prints of the High Sierras, released in 1927. Our next image is the Titanic Rediscovery. Now for this one, this is more a history of the Titanic than of the photo itself, but it's still very much interesting, so we're going to go on and learn a little bit about the Titanic. So RMS Titanic was a British passenger liner operated by the White Star Line, which sank in the North Atlantic Ocean on April 15, 1912, after striking an iceberg during her maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York City, US. Of the estimated 2,200 passengers and crew on board, more than 1,500 died, making it the deadliest sinking of a single ship up to that time. It remains the deadliest peacetime sinking of a superliner cruise ship. The disaster drew public attention, provided foundational material for the disaster film genre, and has inspired many artistic works. RMS Titanic was the largest ship afloat at the time she entered service and the second of the 3 Olympic-class ocean liners operated by the White Star Line. She was built by the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast. Thomas Andrews, the chief naval architect of the shipyard, died in the disaster. Titanic was under the command of Captain Edward Smith, who went down with the ship. The ocean liner carried some of the wealthiest people in the world, as well as hundreds of immigrants from Great Britain and Ireland, Scandinavia, and elsewhere throughout Europe who were seeking a new life in the US and Canada. The first-class accommodation was designed to be the pinnacle of comfort and luxury, with a gymnasium, swimming pool, libraries, high-class restaurants, and opulent cabins. A high-powered radio telegraph transmitter was available for sending passenger marconograms and for the ship's operational use. Titanic had advanced safety features such as watertight compartments and remotely activated watertight doors, contributing to its reputation as unsinkable. Damn, that's ironic. Titanic was equipped with 16 lifeboat davits and capable of lowering 3 lifeboats for a total of 48 boats. She carried only 20 lifeboats, 4 of which were collapsible and proved hard to launch while she was sinking. Collapsible A nearly swamped and was filled with a foot of water until rescue. Collapsible B completely overturned while launching. Together, the 20 lifeboats could hold 1,178 people, about half of the number of passengers on board, and 1/3 of the number of passengers the ship could have carried at full capacity, consistent with the maritime safety regulations of the era. When the ship sank, many of the lifeboats that had been lowered were only about half full. Crazy, crazy history. It's also a movie, obviously, 2-parter. If you want to check that out, it's probably going to have a better visualization of that history than I could provide. And let's move on. The next photo is called Hubble Deep Field. The Hubble Deep Field, or HDF, is an image of a small region of the constellation Ursa Major, constructed from a series of observations by the Hubble Space Telescope. It covers an area of about 2.6 arc minutes on a side, about 1/24 millionth of the whole sky, which is equivalent to an angular size to a tennis ball at a distance of 100 meters. The image was assembled from 342 separate exposures taken with the Space Telescope, Wide Field, and Planetary Camera. 2. Over 10 consecutive days between December 18th and 28th, 1995. The field is so small that only a few foreground stars in the Milky Way lie within it. Thus, almost all of the 3,000 objects in the image are galaxies, some of which are among the youngest and most distant known. By revealing such large numbers of very young galaxies, the HDF has become a landmark image in the study of early universe. 3 years after the HDF observations were taken, a region in the South Celestial Hemisphere was imagined in a similar way and named the Hubble Deep Field South. The similarities between the two regions strengthen the belief that the universe is uniform over large scales and that the Earth occupies a typical region in the universe, the cosmological principle. A wider but shallower survey was also made as part of the Great Observatory's Origins Deep Survey. In 2004, a deeper image known as the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, HUDF for short, was constructed from a few months of light exposure. The HUDF image was at the time the most sensitive astronomical image ever made at visible wavelength, and it remained so until the Hubble Extreme Deep Field XDF was released in 2012. Well, damn, those photos are interesting. I kind of want to make a video on themselves only. Those are cool. I'll save that for later. Our next photo is the last photo of Princess Diana alive. Diana's last photo includes some of her in her car before the fateful crash. Upon leaving the Ritz Paris, Henry Paul, the person behind the wheel, drove through the city with paparazzi in pursuit. Diana and Al Fayed sat in the backseat with Paul and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones up front. Ultimately, the vehicle crashed in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Not only did Diana die, but so did Al Fayed and Paul. Jones survived the crash but couldn't recall anything in the moments leading up to it. Following Diana's death, an investigator had an emotional conversation with William and Harry. They talked for more than an hour. During that time, the investigator provided an overview of the crash and Diana's son's asked question. Ahead of the 25-year anniversary of Diana's death, Harry shared his plans for marking the occasion would include sharing his late mother's memory with his children. Our next image is Kozarcanka. Kozarcanka, or meaning woman from Kozara, is a World War II photograph that became iconic in the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Shot by Yugoslav artistic photographer Zor Skrigan in northern Bosnia during the winter of 1943 or 1944, it shows a smiling female partisan wearing a Titovka cap and with a rifle slung over her shoulder. The subject of the portrait is Milja Marin, a Bosnian Serb from a village at the foot of Mount Kozara. Shortly after the war, she married a fellow partisan and lived in the town of Prijedor. She died in 2007 at the age of 81. Kozarcanka was featured in widely circulated school textbooks, war monographs, and posters, as well as on the cover of an album by a well-known Yugoslav pop band. Marin's identity as the subject of the photograph was not widely known in socialist Yugoslavia. Our next image is Crasher Squirrel. Crasher Squirrel is the name given to a squirrel seen in a photograph originally intended to be a self-portrait of a Minnesota couple. It can also refer to the resulting internet meme. The photograph was taken by Melissa Brandt and her husband Jackson while visiting Lake Minnewanka in Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada in May 2009. While the couple were posing on some rocks next to the lake using a camera with a wireless remote shutter release to take photos of themselves, a golden-mantled ground squirrel began exploring the area. The squirrel stood up in front of the lens and the Brands were able to capture the image of a squirrel, clearly in focus in front of the camera. That is amazing. That's iconic. I'm surprised I have not heard of that before. Our next image is Crying Jordan. Crying Jordan, or Crying MJ, Crying Michael Jordan, or even Weepy J is an internet meme in which an image of NBA Hall of Famer Michael Jordan crying is superimposed on images of athletes or others who have suffered various mishaps. The source photo was taken by New York Times photographer Stephen O'Vera during Jordan's speech at his Basketball Hall of Fame induction ceremony on September 11, 2009. The image was used in 2012 without modifications to comment on Jordan's decision to buy Charlotte Bobcats NBA franchise. The photoshopped head alone was first used in 2014 by posters on internet message board boxden.com. Crying Jordan began to attract mainstream media attention in the late 2015 and early 2016 and would eventually become a global used internet meme. After Game 6 of the 2021 NBA Finals, in which the Milwaukee Bucks defeated the Phoenix Suns to take a 4-2 series lead, a media producer purchased the domain cryingjordan.com and sent a redirect to Chris Paul's profile on the Phoenix Suns website. An open-source mobile app called the Crying Jordan Meme Generator allows users to easily add the Jordan image to other images and has been downloaded by several thousand people. This next image is Burning Wind Turbine. This photograph tugs at your heartstrings. Two engineers hug and cling to each other as fire and smoke creep toward them. They both died after. According to news reports, one of them jumped off the turbine while the other succumbed to the fire. What makes this more heartbreaking is that the two engineers are just aged 19 and 21. This accident happened in October of last year at a wind farm in Olgensplaat, Holland. A crew of 4 were conducting routine maintenance at the 67-meter high wind turbine when a fire suddenly broke out. 2 of the 4 people were able to escape while the other 2 got trapped. That's very sad. Our next photo is Station Squabble. Station Squabble is a digital photograph taken by Sam Rowley that won the National History Museum's Wildlife Photographer of the Year People's Choice Award, described by the BBC as an annual international famous YWPY competition on February 12, 2020. 2 mice, which had been foraging separately on a platform in the London Underground, are depicted fighting over a crumb that they had found simultaneously. To capture the shot, Rowley spent a week overnight in the underground system, according to the BBC, receiving many strange looks from commuters, Rowley said, as he had to lie on the various station platforms with his camera. The split-second face-off received around 28,000 votes. The mice's squabble, Rowley later commented, was over in seconds. The photograph was chosen from a short list of 25 out of 48,000 submitted images. The director of the Natural History Museum described the picture as showing a fascinating glimpse into how wildlife functions in a human-dominated environment. Rowley is a researcher with the BBC's photography unit. The New Straits Times described it as depicting Jerry versus Jerry, referencing the cartoon characters Jerry Mouse from Tom and Jerry. That's funny. What's up, guys? I hope that you guys enjoyed this part 1 of level 2 of our photographs iceberg. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Stay hydrated, everyone, and I will see you guys in the next video for this photographs iceberg.